On June 28, 1914, a young man named Gavrilo Princip stood on a crowded street in Sarajevo. His hands trembled as he lifted a gun. He fired 2 shots, and in that heartbeat, the world changed. Those bullets killed Archduke Franz Ferdinand, but they were fired long before that day. They were fired through decades of humiliation, anger, and nationalism, emotions fermenting beneath the surface of Europe. And in less than 2 months, those emotions ignited World War I. One act of emotion, multiplied by millions, burned continents. Human history isn't written in logic. It's written in feeling. Wars don't start with weapons. They start with offense, with pride, with the ache of injustice. Religion didn't rise from data. It rose from awe, from fear, from wonder. Science didn't begin with equations. It began with curiosity, with frustration, with longing. Every revolution, every philosophy, every art was first a storm in someone's heart. And that's the irony, isn't it? The same emotion that makes us love also makes us destroy. The same compassion that builds temples fuels wars. The same pride that drives progress births downfall. In 399 BC, Socrates was sentenced to death, not because he was wrong, but because he made people feel wrong. Because truth isn't dangerous, emotions about truth are. Fast forward to 1633. Galileo Galilei stands before the Inquisition. He shows evidence that Earth moves around the sun, but the church doesn't see astronomy, it feels blasphemy. The priests weren't fighting science, they were defending their emotional world, their meaning, their certainty. When emotion and evidence collide, emotion usually wins. Because truth doesn't live in our eyes. It lives in our amygdala, in the ancient trembling core of the brain where fear and faith still speak louder than reason. And yet, emotion is not the enemy. It is the source code of everything we are. Without emotion, we wouldn't care to discover truth. Without curiosity, science dies. Without empathy, morality fades. Without love, civilization collapses. Emotion built the pyramids. Emotion wrote the Quran, the Bible, the Gita, and the origin of the species. Emotion, not reason, drives the human story. But we've misunderstood emotion for centuries. We've treated it as instinct, as if it comes from somewhere deep, uncontrollable, primitive. Charles Darwin thought emotions were biological fingerprints, universal, automatic, the same for every human. A smile meant happiness, a frown meant anger. Simple, predictable. But emotions are never simple. When Darwin wrote The Expression of the Emotions in Man and Animals, he believed emotions were survival tools, ancient software coded into our DNA. But Lisa Feldman Barrett, centuries later, looked closer. She didn't find universal patterns. She found stories. Stories our brains tell to make sense of bodily chaos. Stories that shift with language, culture, memory, and prediction. You don't feel angry because of your genes. You feel angry because your brain learned that pattern from your past. And yet, those patterns shaped history.
It wasn't logic that made a crusader march to Jerusalem. It was the emotion of sacred purpose. It wasn't evidence that made Galileo recant. It was the emotion of fear. It wasn't hatred that started world wars. It was wounded pride dressed as justice. Emotion is not weakness. It's fuel. Divine, dangerous, necessary. Even science, our beacon of reason, was born out of frustration and wonder. Isaac Newton, in the plague years, locked himself away not out of logic, but loneliness. Isolation became insight. Pain became progress. His emotion didn't distract him from discovery. It drove him toward it. And yet we keep pretending emotion and reason are enemies. Philosophers tried to separate them. Plato said, emotion clouds the soul. Stoics said it weakens the mind. Even early psychologists called it irrational noise. But then came William James, who said, maybe emotions aren't the aftermath of thought, maybe they are the thought. He asked, what if we don't cry because we're sad, but we're sad because we cry? A radical idea that emotion is the body's interpretation of itself. And Barrett took that even further. She said, emotions are not reactions, they are predictions. Your brain doesn't wait for the world, it guesses it. Every time you feel something, your brain is comparing what's happening now to everything that's ever happened before. And it fills in the gaps. That's why love feels like déjà vu. That's why anger feels ancient. That's why grief feels infinite. Because emotions are built from memory. And when billions of human brains predict together, they create civilizations, religions, wars, peace treaties. They create the collective emotion called history. So when we say emotions make us human, we're not talking about something soft or sentimental. We're talking about the force that shapes destiny. Emotion is not chaos. It is creation. And maybe understanding how emotions are made isn't just about psychology. Maybe it's about peace. Because if we can understand what makes us angry, we can stop wars. If we can decode what makes us fearful, we can stop hate. If we can see how love is built, we can rebuild it. Maybe the next evolution of humanity won't come from technology or intelligence, but from emotional awareness. Because everything that ever happened, every empire, every heartbreak, every invention, started not with a thought, but with a feeling. And that is how emotions make the world.
In 1983, a neuroscientist named Benjamin Libet made a discovery that terrified philosophers. He found that the brain makes a decision before you're even aware of it. Milliseconds before you choose to move your hand, your brain has already started the motion. In other words, you don't decide, you just become aware of the decision your brain already made. And if that's true for movement, what about emotion? Let's imagine something simple. You're walking down the street, headphones in, lost in thought. A car honks suddenly behind you. Your heart jumps, your stomach tightens, your muscles brace. It feels instant, like fear was triggered. But in truth, your brain predicted it before you felt it. Here's how. Your brain, constantly scanning for danger, had already built a library of possibilities. The sound of honks, the meaning of speed, the memory of past scares. When it detected a sound pattern it didn't expect, it didn't wait for clarity. It guessed, this is danger. And in the space of a heartbeat, it launched your body into protection mode. That moment wasn't reaction, it was prediction. This is what Lisa Feldman Barrett calls the predictive brain. It doesn't just see the world, it guesses it. Every moment, it builds a model of what's about to happen, then uses that model to sculpt what you feel. Your brain is less like a camera and more like a movie director, constantly scripting the next scene. That's why when you walk into a dark alley, you feel tense before anything happens. Your brain predicts threat, prepares your body, raises your heart rate, sharpens your hearing. When nothing happens, it recalibrates. Okay, false alarm. But the emotion, that electricity in your chest, already played out its role. The irony, your brain doesn't predict for accuracy. It predicts for survival. It's not asking what's true, it's asking what's safest. And that's why you can feel angry, sad, or scared even when nothing's wrong. Because your brain is a storyteller, and sometimes it writes tragedies to keep you alive.
Take another example. You're at an airport waiting for someone. Their flight is delayed. Your stomach feels heavy. You're breathing uneven. Your brain starts predicting. What if something happened? What if they're not coming? Your body reacts as if the story is true. That weight in your stomach? That's not intuition. That's your brain's prediction loop in motion. When they finally appear, the emotion flips instantly from fear to relief. But the biology? It's the same. Same heartbeat, same hormones, same body budget, just a new interpretation. Every emotion begins as a guess. A forecast your brain makes to keep your internal world in balance. Barrett calls this body budgeting. Your brain's main job isn't thinking, it's regulating your body. It's like an accountant predicting how much energy, glucose, oxygen, and effort you'll need. When you predict danger, it spends resources, adrenaline, focus, tension. When you predict safety, it saves them. Calm, rest, recovery. That feeling of being emotionally drained? That's a body budget in deficit. So, emotions are not random noise. They're energy calculations. Your brain's way of saying, hey, I've seen this before. Here's what it probably means. It's not reacting to what is. It's predicting what will be. A fascinating study showed this in action. Researchers placed electrodes on people's skin to measure sweating, a sign of emotional arousal. Then they showed them pictures, some pleasant, some disturbing. Over time, the participants' bodies began to react before the images appeared. Their brains had learned the pattern and predicted the emotion early.
They felt before they knew why. This is why we get bad vibes in certain places. It's why déjà vu feels eerie. It's why we sense tension in a room before a word is spoken. Our brains don't wait for proof. They forecast reality using memory, context, and imagination. You're not just living in the world, you're living inside your brain's prediction of the world. Think of emotion as the bridge between those predictions and your body, a constant negotiation between what your brain expects and what your senses report. When the world matches the prediction, you feel calm. When it doesn't, you feel emotion. That tension between what is and what was expected is the birthplace of feeling. That's why love can surprise you, why grief can linger when the world has moved on, why joy sometimes sneaks up quietly, unplanned, because every emotion is your brain updating its model of reality. And that changes everything. It means emotions are not outside your control, they're part of your design. If you can change what your brain predicts, you can change what you feel. You can retrain your emotional world. You can rebuild your experience of life. That's not philosophy anymore. That's neuroscience. The predictive brain isn't cold logic. It's a living storyteller. It's the reason you sense danger before the snake moves. The reason you fall in love before you understand why. The reason you forgive before you explain it. Because before thought comes prediction. Before choice comes emotion. Before you know what you feel, you already feel it. And that, my friend, is how we feel before we know we feel.
You know that feeling when you say, "I'm just not myself today." You think it's emotional, but often it's chemical. You didn't wake up sad. You just didn't sleep enough. You didn't lose motivation. You skipped breakfast. You didn't hate everyone. You're dehydrated. This isn't weakness, it's biology. Lisa Feldman Barrett calls this your body budget. Your brain's most important job isn't thinking, it's managing your body's energy. Every heartbeat, every breath, every sugar molecule, balanced like deposits and withdrawals in an emotional bank account. When your body budget runs low, your brain predicts something's wrong, and it labels that imbalance with emotion. Tired, irritated. Hungry, anxious. Lonely, sad. It's not that you're broken. You're just overdrawn. Your brain is like the world's most advanced accountant. It keeps track of your heart rate, your oxygen, your hormones, and constantly asks, do we have enough energy to handle this? If yes, you feel calm, open, creative. If no, you feel restless, defensive, emotional. That tension you call stress is your brain shouting, we're spending more than we're earning. Think about a normal day. You skip breakfast, rush to work, scroll through bad news, fight traffic, drink too much coffee, forget to breathe. By noon, your brain's budget is in crisis. So when your coworker says something small, your brain doesn't hear words. It hears threat. It goes into emotional debt and pays for it with anger. The fight wasn't about what they said. It was about what your body couldn't afford to feel. Ever heard the word hangry? Hungry plus angry. That's the body budget in one sentence. Your brain is running out of glucose, so it predicts irritation as the easiest explanation. Same chemistry, different label. That's why mindfulness, nutrition, and sleep aren't self-care trends. They're emotional regulation tools. Barrett's research shows when your brain predicts energy loss, it triggers emotions to motivate you. Anxiety isn't punishment, it's a call to act. Sadness isn't weakness, it's conservation mode, your system slowing down to recover. Your emotions are your body's language. It's just trying to talk to you. Let's take heartbreak. You lose someone you love. You say, it feels like my chest is breaking. And science says, it's not a metaphor. Your brain interprets social rejection as physical injury. It floods your body with stress hormones, tightens muscles, reduces oxygen. You feel heavy because your body budget just crashed. Your brain predicted the pain, and then it made it real. Now, think of joy. When you laugh with friends, your brain deposits oxytocin, serotonin, dopamine, chemical currency that replenishes your account. That's why connection heals. It's literal fuel. When you isolate yourself, you save energy for a while, but your budget starts starving. No input, no replenishment. That's when loneliness turns into sadness, and sadness into fatigue. Your emotional stability isn't built on strength, it's built on balance. A balanced body creates a balanced mind. You can test this right now. Next time you feel off, don't ask, "What's wrong with me?" Ask, "What does my body need?" Water? Sleep? Movement? Connection? 9 out of 10 times, the emotion will change once the budget does. There's a study where scientists found that people who track their physical state, heart rate, temperature, breath, have better emotional regulation. Why? Because they're reading their body budget in real time. Mindfulness isn't magic, it's accounting. But when you ignore your budget, your brain compensates with prediction. It fills in the gaps with emotion. That's when stress becomes paranoia, fatigue becomes shame, loneliness becomes anger, because the brain hates not knowing why you feel something, so it invents a story. You think you're fighting others. You're fighting your own imbalance. This is why compassion matters. Everyone you meet is balancing their invisible budget. The rude cashier, the distant friend, the angry stranger. They're not monsters. They're just tired systems trying to make emotional sense of physical depletion. If we saw that, the world would be softer. Your body and your mind aren't separate. They're two halves of the same equation. When one side suffers, the other interprets. Your emotions are your brain's translations of your body's needs. You are not too sensitive. You're too alive. So take care of your body, not because it's a temple, but because it's your first language. When you feed it well, rest it deeply, move it freely, you teach your brain new predictions. You teach it peace. And that, my friend, is how your body creates your feelings. Picture a baby, only a few months old. It cries, its face red, fists clenched. The mother rushes over, whispering, "Oh, you're hungry." Next time, the same cry, she says, "You're tired." Slowly, the child begins to learn that the squirming in its stomach, the ache in its head, the tension in its chest means something. Not because biology declared it, but because language did. That's how every human begins life, with raw sensations first and meanings later. Lisa Feldman Barrett says that emotions aren't discovered, they're constructed. They are not primitive relics of evolution waiting to explode from the amygdala. They're stories your brain writes to explain what the body feels. And like any good storyteller, your brain edits, revises, and rewrites depending on context. Take one example. You're sitting in a dark theater. The music builds, the killer appears, and you feel your heart pounding. Fear, right? But what if you're watching the same heartbeat, same body signals, during a football match, or while falling in love? Same physiology, different concept. The only thing that changed was the story your brain told about those sensations. So, the brain does this every second. It gathers 3 ingredients. 1, the data from your body, heart rate, breathing, hormones. 2, the context, where you are, who's near,
What's happening? 3. Your past experiences, every similar moment you've lived. Then it mixes them like paint and predicts the color of your current emotion. That mixture is what you call feeling.
Think about driving home in traffic. Someone cuts you off. Your heart spikes, jaw tightens. Instantly, your brain searches its archive. What does this feel like? Anger? Yes, anger fits. But what if that day you just heard good news? Your brain might label it annoyance instead. Same body, different construction. That's why we say, I woke up on the wrong side of the bed, because our emotional factory is already running, and whatever prediction it starts with colors the rest of the day. And here's the strange part. The more emotion concepts you have, the more variety your brain can build. If you only know the words sad and angry, the world will feel black and white. But learn melancholy, nostalgic, resentful, disappointed, and suddenly your brain can paint with finer shades. Barrett calls this emotional granularity. Language is the palette your brain uses to construct the masterpiece called you. There's a study where scientists taught people new emotion words like frustration, a blend of frustration and exhaustion. Weeks later, those people reported calmer lives. Why? Because when they could name their inner storms precisely, their brains stopped guessing so violently. Clarity is emotional control. Now imagine two cultures. In one, people are taught that showing anger is shameful. In the other, expressing it is strength. Same human nervous system, different emotional architecture. In Japan, silence can mean anger. In America, anger demands volume. In Tahiti, there's no direct word for sadness. They call it feeling tired inside. So the emotion isn't in the face, it's in the framework, the learned code your brain uses to translate body into meaning.
And that's where things get spiritual. If emotions are constructed, then reality itself is partially constructed too. You don't see the world as it is, you see the world as your brain predicts it to be, colored by your body, your words, your culture, your past. That means the emotion you feel when you see a sunset isn't in the sky, it's in the story your brain tells about the sky. It's humbling, isn't it? To realize that joy, fear, awe, they're not objective forces beamed into you. They're collaborations between your neurons and your memories. You are both the artist and the canvas. Now, this doesn't make emotions fake. It makes them alive, dynamic, editable. When you learn new experiences, your brain rewrites its emotional library. When you travel, meet new people, read poetry, you feed it new examples, new possibilities of what a heartbeat could mean. A racing heart could mean fear. It could mean love. It could mean awe. It could mean life. The choice depends on how your brain constructs it. Think of heartbreak again. For some, it feels like death. For others, rebirth. Same loss, different construction. That's why grief can transform into art, pain into compassion, loneliness into wisdom. The emotion wasn't destiny, it was architecture. So when someone asks, can people change? Barrett would say, yes, when they teach their brain new concepts. When you practice gratitude, you're training your brain to predict safety. When you meditate, you teach it to delay judgment. When you journal, you give it vocabulary. You're not fixing emotions. You're rebuilding their blueprints. Every emotion you experience today will subtly rewrite tomorrow's. That's the beauty of the predictive brain. It never stops learning. You are not a victim of your past feelings. You are the author of the next ones. Philosophers used to think reason must rule over emotion. But now we know emotion is the foundation of reason. It's what gives thought its weight, decision its meaning, and memory its color. Without constructed emotion, we wouldn't care enough to think at all. And here's the paradox. If emotions are built, then every time you feel deeply, you're not discovering truth, you're creating it. Your sorrow, your joy, your anger, each one a small act of imagination. The same imagination that built language, built civilization, built gods. Emotion is humanity's oldest invention. So next time you say, "I can't help how I feel," remember, you helped create it. Your brain made that emotion the same way it makes music from noise, dreams from darkness, meaning from chaos. And if you built it once, you can rebuild it again. That's not denial. That's power. You are the architect of feeling, the sculptor of your own inner weather. And every heartbeat is a chance to design a new world inside you. When you were born, you didn't know what sadness was. You learned it from the tone of your mother's voice, from stories, from what people cried about. Every sigh you ever saw, every laugh you ever heard, your brain stored them like notes in a song. And little by little, culture taught you how the music of emotion should sound. In ancient Greece, melancholia was not depression. It was a noble imbalance of black bile, a sign of wisdom. In Japan, there is amae, a tender dependence between two people, sweet and childlike, that English has no word for. In Finland, there's sisu, courage that refuses to quit, a calm defiance in hardship. Same human nervous system, different emotional vocabularies. Culture doesn't just decorate emotion, it defines its borders. Think about anger. In some cultures, it's moral fire, proof that you stand for justice. In others, it's shameful noise, proof that you've lost control. Your body's chemistry is the same, but the meaning of that chemistry shifts with the story your society tells about it. Lisa Feldman Barrett's work shows that culture provides the concept library your brain draws from. When your heart races, your brain looks for a label. If your culture says fear, you feel fear. If it says awe before the divine, you feel reverence. If it says spirit possession, you might fall to the ground shaking, certain a god is near. There's a story from 1962 in Tanganyika. A girl at a boarding school started laughing uncontrollably. Within hours, hundreds of students were laughing too, unable to stop. No toxin, no disease, just emotion, contagious meaning. Their culture called it mass hysteria, and because everyone believed the label, the emotion spread like fire. That's the cultural illusion in motion. Shared prediction becomes shared reality. Religions have known this for millennia. They orchestrate emotion with ritual, the rise of the choir, the scent of incense, the rhythm of prayer. Those aren't random aesthetics. They're prediction cues. They tell every brain in the room what to feel, and the brains oblige. What you call divine presence may also be hundreds of nervous systems synchronizing in perfect emotional time. Politics uses the same code. Propaganda doesn't change facts, it changes feelings about facts. A slogan repeats until it becomes emotional truth. That truth shapes decisions, and decisions shape history. Empires are built and broken on the architecture of collective emotion. And love, even love, is scripted. Hollywood taught us the look, the timing, the soundtrack. Bollywood taught us the devotion, the endurance. Each culture choreographs the dance differently, but the heart keeps time with whatever rhythm it's taught to believe in. So what happens when you step outside that rhythm? When your feelings don't fit the script? You start to think something's wrong with you. But maybe nothing's wrong. Maybe you're just hearing your own melody beneath society's orchestra. Every culture trains its citizens to manage emotion, to smile in photographs, to stay quiet at funerals, to cheer at weddings. We mistake those performances for human nature. They're not nature, they're agreement. Barrett says emotion concepts are social contracts. They live between us, not inside us. Break the contract, and people call you strange, unstable, sinful, enlightened, depending on the story they serve.
It always starts the same way. Two people, one misunderstanding, a few sentences that could mean anything. And then, silence, or shouting, or in some corners of history, war. We think conflict begins with ideas, but most conflict begins with misfelt emotion, the moment when our body says danger and our brain agrees before checking the facts. It began, as great disasters often do, with something small. A pistol, a heartbeat, a single prediction gone wrong. Gavrilo Princip was 19. He wasn't a monster. He was, in his own story, a patriot, a boy carrying the emotions of an entire people. For years, his country had lived under an empire that made them feel invisible. Each insult, each humiliation, added interest to a debt of anger that Europe would one day have to pay. When he fired those 2 bullets into the Archduke's car, the sound didn't just shatter glass, it shattered certainty. In Vienna, politicians felt insulted. In Berlin, strategists felt cornered. In St. Petersburg, generals felt honor-bound to respond. No new facts entered the world that day, only feelings. Within weeks, telegrams became declarations, declarations became mobilizations, and mobilizations became trenches stretching from the North Sea to Switzerland. 4 years later, 20 million lives were gone. History books call it geopolitics, but if you peel back the language, you see something simpler: a chain reaction of misunderstood emotion.
Fear was the first link. Every nation feared humiliation more than it feared war. So fear disguised itself as courage. Courage became pride. Pride became righteousness. And righteousness, the most seductive emotion of all, became the engine that no one could turn off. No leader wanted to look weak. No citizen wanted to feel cowardly. So they predicted honor in the smoke of cannon fire and found only grief. Look closely and you'll see the same pattern in miniature every day. Someone says something sharp. Another feels the sting of disrespect. Pride predicts danger, and anger rushes to defend it. The scale changes, but the chemistry doesn't. Barrett would say every soldier, every statesman in that summer of 1914 was a predictive brain misreading its own body budget, mistaking the anxiety of uncertainty for the certainty of purpose. Their hearts raced, their muscles tensed. The brain asked, "What does this mean?" And culture answered, "It means honor." The emotion constructed itself perfectly and catastrophically. When emotions fail, they don't vanish, they overperform. They grow so loud that we stop checking whether they're right. The feeling of threat becomes the proof of threat. And soon every flag waves not for land or law, but for the primitive comfort of being sure. That's why World War I wasn't born from evil genius. It was born from misinterpreted fear, multiplied by millions of nervous systems that could not afford uncertainty. So when we say a war started, what we really mean is emotions synchronized. Millions of brains predicting danger together until the prediction itself became real. And that's the tragedy and the lesson of 1914. The human species, capable of reason, still governed by forecasts written in adrenaline. The first shot was a bullet. The next billion shots were echoes of the same mistaken feeling. Echoes we still hear whenever pride shouts louder than empathy.